Welcome to the Flex Forward podcast, where grit meets growth. With your host, Nick Espanet, bringing you stories of resilience, reinvention, and the real climb to success.
All right, everyone, welcome to the Flex Forward podcast. Today, we are joined by Christopher Chamberland. Christopher is over quantum computing at NVIDIA, and let him give you a little more information on that. I'm excited to hear about what it is he does in his day-to-day life and how he's been able to grow and get to the position that he's in today. Christopher, welcome to the Flex Forward podcast. We're glad to have you. Can you share a little information about you and what it is you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So the ultimate goal is to build quantum computers. There's been a lot of interest in doing that for, I guess, since the 80s. And the reason is that at some point it was discovered that there are certain algorithms that will never be able to be, solved efficiently with the classical computers that we have today. You would need, billions of years to solve these kinds of problems. And some of them are very relevant to what we want to do, like simulating molecules, understanding their dynamics, and so on. And also breaking RSA encryption. So there's cryptographic protocols that are very hard to decode. But there were algorithms that were developed where if you had a quantum computer, you can solve them. Problems that would take billions of years to solve could be solved in, the matter of days, hours, or even minutes. Oh, wow. And so that got people very excited about that possibility. Now, the problem, of course, is we need to have the quantum computer in the first place, and that's very, very difficult because unlike by classical computers, I mean the computers that we use today where information is encoded in bits of zeros and ones, those are very reliable, they're very resilient, and they can scale to very large systems. With quantum computers, it's difficult to scale, and they're very error-prone, meaning that when you try to do computations with a quantum computer, errors can happen at a much, much higher frequency than you would with classical computers. So part of what I focus on is what's called quantum error correction, and that's to essentially develop an architecture or architectures for quantum computers where you can detect errors whenever they happen and remove those errors from the system. And that would allow you to run large-scale quantum algorithms that are useful. And so,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that's my primary area of focus, and they're applying that to different hardware architectures.
That's fascinating. Is the increased chance of errors just because there's so many more interaction or transactions is not the right word, but actions happening, so there's increased chance of error? Is that, I don't know if I'm asking that question right.
So there's a couple of things that are going on at the same time. First, so information is stored in the state of a quantum mechanical system. And in quantum mechanics, there's a phenomenon known as decoherence. And that's where a quantum system starts to behave classically. So it no longer behaves quantum mechanically. So for example, when one architecture that's promising is what's called superconducting circuits. And you have to cool these chips down to extremely low temperatures, like 10 to the minus 3 Kelvin, which is about 1,000 times colder than in space. And you have this big dilution refrigerator that's used to get to these very, very cold temperatures. And if the temperature is slightly above that, the system decoheres and it no longer behaves quantum. And so decoherence is a big phenomenon. When you're dealing with quantum systems, they tend to they can decohere. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is any computer, whether it's a classical or quantum, in order to run algorithms, you have to do what's called gates. So those are actions that you perform to change the state from one state to another, and you perform these gates. And these gates in the quantum world, they're very error prone because they're highly imperfect. And so 1 out of 1,000 times, or even 1 out of 100 times, when you do the gate, you'll introduce errors into the system. And so there's kind of two competing effects. One, quantum systems are very, very sensitive to their environment, and they can have often undesired interactions with their environment, and that's not something that happens easily in classical systems. So that's one thing. And then the other is the gates that you do, the operations that you do on those quantum systems. They're highly imperfect, and they also can add a lot of errors. And then there's a third thing too, which is you might have heard this before, but in quantum systems, you can be in what's called a superposition, meaning you can be in multiple states at the same time. And when you do a measurement, that's when you collapse to a certain state. And so in quantum computers, you often have to do measurements on what are called the qubits. The qubits are the quantum systems where information is stored, and you have to do these measurements. And these measurements often can be noisy as well, meaning that you expect to get a certain result, but you get a different result because an error happened due to the measurement probability of failing. And so you have these three things that can happen, and when you combine them, that can introduce errors at a pretty high frequency. And so it's very important to deal with that.
Very interesting. And it sounds like this is something that a very specialty niche. How, as you started your journey down your education or career, what did you find set you apart to help you start down this path of quantum computing? I almost want to say quantum physics, but quantum computing.
So it's a bit of a long story. I did my undergrad degree in physics and math, and at the time I had a very different mindset that I had now. I wanted to do what's called string theory, which is basically tries to combine Einstein's theory of general relativity with quantum field theory, which explains the world of subatomic particles and when they're moving very quickly and so on. And there are certain events like the Big Bang or the center of a black hole where you have to have both these theories kind of mesh together, and that's very, very difficult. Like it doesn't happen so far right now. And so string theory was a candidate to be a viable theory that would combine those two things. So I actually started my graduate degree at my master's in string theory, but I saw a lot of really, really smart people that would graduate and then not get jobs in that field, because the jobs in that field are very, very scarce, and they're mostly in academic institutions. And so I didn't want that to happen to me, and so I switched fields. I went into quantum information because I knew it had a lot more practical applications, but it still wasn't focused on quantum computing. And so actually what happened was I started a PhD program at UBC, and similar to what I had experienced with string theory, so it was what's called condensed matter physics, which is the physics of very, very large systems. And I was seeing a lot of really brilliant people, again, graduate and not get jobs. So I said, look, I'm going to pick something that's within my area of expertise, but that has a high probability of, being practical. And so I kind of took a step back. I went to my undergrad institution until I really wanted to figure out what I was going to do. And I was taking a few computer science classes, because obviously in computer science, there's a lot of jobs there. And I remember one of them was a theoretical, and the professor was saying, they were talking about algorithms that the computers we have today will never be able to solve. And she said, but it's unknown if quantum computers can solve those efficiently. And there's kind of a light bulb that flickered in my head. And that's when I had the idea. I said, listen, I'm pretty good with quantum mechanics. I'm good in math. And that can be applied to building quantum computers. And, I do see, this was in 2015, I do see tremendous opportunity, in this field, because at that time it was kind of just starting, but you had a few companies that were starting to go into that. So I applied to the Institute for Quantum Computing, which was one of the biggest academic institutions at the time. And, after a little while, finally got into the program. And my advisor was Ray Laflamme, who was a student of Stephen Hawking. So he was also the director of the institute at the time. So I got to learn a lot from him, and he gave me my first project in error correction. So I hadn't anticipated. I was kind of open to working in any field of quantum computing, but he gave me a project in error correction, and that's how the whole thing got started. And I just stuck to that field from that moment onward.
What a great story of seeing a need. I mean, you have intelligence and math and those, but you saw, maybe you didn't want to be in academia, or that, there's not a lot of jobs, that you start looking like, where is there a need for my skill set and what you enjoy doing. I hope you enjoy doing it. Hearing you talk about it, I believe you do. So, but you saw and where there was a need. And I think people can apply that in many walks of life, finding it can be, a simple machine to a food product or something. If you see a need somewhere and you can fill that with your skill set and grow it. I think that Christopher gives a great story on how to do that. It's, in a whole different field that I didn't even know until we got on a call today. There was anything quantum computing. My wife has a biochemistry degree, but then she we stayed home with our kids, but taught at our school. But she talks about quantum physics and some things every once in a while that usually are going over my head. But I know it's out there. But this is a whole nother level of stuff. So but I think everybody can apply this to different walks of life and find somewhere there's a need and apply your love and your skill set in that and it'll serve. I mean, I think you'll be fulfilled as a career and you're helping somebody and you can have an income that way too, or so fill two roles. That's awesome.
And I would just add, like, a lot of people were telling me that I was crazy when I quit my first PhD program, and they, because things were going really well, but I just knew that it probably wasn't the right choice for in the long run. So I've always been a long-term thinker, and so generally speaking, it's good to take risks, and if your gut tells you that there's a better option or what you're doing now is not the right thing, it's often a good idea to listen to it.
No, for sure. Very well said. So if someone's listening and wants to learn different ways to get better at something, maybe through a podcast or a book, do you have any things you can recommend that you have found helpful to you and as you've worked your way through your career?
Yeah, I mean, so like once you're in it, obviously being up to date with so Archive is a place where new papers come out every single day, and it's important to be up to speed. But when you're just getting started, I mean, so if you want something in quantum computing, there's a book by Isaac Chuang on quantum computing. It's like Quantum Information. I forget the exact title. I could get back to you on that, but that's like the first book that I really read to just understand the very basics. So there's two authors. It's Nielsen and Chuang. So that's like the book that pretty much everyone reads when they're just getting started. But if we want to even take a step back, like there are some fundamental books that I read. So the one by Steve, A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking, that got me very interested in physics in general and just understanding the laws of the universe and why things are the way they are. How did the universe evolve? How did we get to where we are today? And there was a couple of books by Brian Greene that talked about string theory, but also the development of the cosmos that I read that really got me passionate about starting and going into quantum and also general relativity and that kind of stuff. And that's how it pivoted to eventual quantum computing.
That's fascinating. Yeah. So I'll try to get our team to list those in the description if we can get them on there. So that lots of good stuff. But on these books, I want to get the Brief History of Time. Sounds fascinating. Maybe a good one for. I may start with. I love reading and different. That's not typically where I would read, but I think that it may be something I would find fascinating. I love math. Math was kind of my easier work in science. But you're on a whole different level of math here at this point, so it's awesome, and it's. I have 3 kids too, and math has always been one of them a little more, but math has been their easier subjects at school. So we do a lot. We've actually challenged one of my daughters right now to try to move ahead at a level. Just some things in school with her math. She's going to be a freshman high school next year, but we kind of put a challenge out there for her to complete one class early, see if she can do it, just to give her a bit of a challenge. So as you've worked through this process, and you sound like you've had to kind of pave some roads occasionally with some new roads that weren't necessarily there. What's one of the biggest challenges you've had to overcome?
Well, definitely when I got started, I knew nothing about error correction, and there had already been so much that had been done. I would read the papers and I didn't understand anything. So I worked really, really hard. Like I was working 100-hour weeks for many years actually. But my biggest challenge was to kind of get my first paper out, my first publication, to get on the map and actually start contributing. So going from 0 to 1, I think, is always the hardest. And I remember, I was in my office like until 3:00 in the morning, even on New Year's Eve and stuff like that. Like the only guy in the building, because I wanted to get this done so badly and make a meaningful contribution. And the first paper I ended up publishing got published in PRL, which is a physics journal for high-end publications. And so it was very satisfying to see that happen in the very first publication. But it did not come easy at all. It was a big grind. And I think whenever you're starting something new, there's just so much to learn that you have to be willing to make a significant time commitment and not give up when things get difficult, because things are always going to get difficult. And even now, quantum error correction is a field that's continually evolving, and there's new ideas that are being presented. And getting up to speed with that is can be a challenge. And so for me, it's like a lifelong commitment that you have to be willing to make and always be willing to put in the time and effort.
That's awesome. I think that's testament to, hard work, but, I don't know if failing's the right word, but, not just, you got to keep plugging away and keep challenging and, failing forward when something doesn't work out, figuring out a different path. And something that one of my other guests said that was eye-opening to me is he said, he's in the AI world. He said, right now, he goes, we think it's moving fast, but today is the slowest it's going to be for the rest of our history. It's going to continue. The speed's going to keep growing. It's like, wow, it was just kind of a fascinating view to look at it, that today is the slowest that technology is going to be evolving for history. I mean, going forward.
Yep.
And just a fascinating way to look at it. Like, you better, if you're involved in it, you need to start getting involved and understanding and deepening your a level of understanding.
I agree. And I would also add one last thing, which is that when you're getting started, it's very easy to be overwhelmed because there's so many different directions you would take, or that you can take. And what I would recommend is pick, a niche area and just focus on that, because it's like, you kind of do the reps, and by specializing in one area, you can really get your brain kind of flowing, and you start to get the correct intuitions, right? And then those intuitions can then be used in other areas or to kind of expand your horizons. But if you're kind of overwhelmed with too many different directions, you'll never kind of develop those mental skills in the first place. And so focusing on one specific, very niche area or problem is a very good way to get started. And that's how I would recommend it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, get focused. And that's with a lot of stuff. Just become laser focused on your goal, and you will grow in that area. Good stuff. So it sounds like you're having a lot of success, and as a lot of people start having success, they start thinking of, potentially looking at other sources of outside income, or maybe something to replace or enhance your income through alternative investments, through stocks or real estate. Have you ever had any thoughts on anything like that, or outside investments outside of your main business?
Absolutely. I mean, I've spent thousands of hours learning how to invest well and how to be well diversified. And so I have, and I've been doing this for 6 years now. I have investments, not just in the stock market, but in private investments, in farmland, and in alternative assets. Ray Dalio's been kind of like a mentor to me, and I learned a lot from him, and just how to be well diversified and find assets that have low correlations. And so that's something that I've been laser focused on implementing in my life, and being disciplined, spending less than you earn, and getting that money to work.
No, for sure. That's awesome. Yeah, I've read a couple of Ray Dalio's books. He's fascinating. Well, after wrapping up the interview, do you have any exciting plans or initiatives in the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, I mean, there's definitely several things that I'm working on at NVIDIA that I can't talk about right now, but are going to be released in the near future, and so I'm very excited about that. And so once they're out there, we'll have the freedom to talk about it. Several products that ideas that I had that are finally going to come to life, and so that's really cool and exciting. And so that's what's driving me at the moment.
That's awesome. I bet you can't wait for it to come out to the public to share that stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Christopher, thank you so much for sharing tips and insights with our listeners today. If people would like to connect with you, what's the best way for them to go about that?
You can either email me or go to my LinkedIn. I respond pretty quickly on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming on to the Flex Forward podcast and sharing information. And listeners, like to thank all of y'all for joining, and be sure to like and share and pass this along. Thanks, Christopher.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Thanks for listening to the Flex Forward podcast. If you've got grit, growth, and a great story, visit flexforwardpodcast.com/guest to apply and join us on the show.